Alrighty, I am going to share my screen. So, a couple things we're going to talk about today. You guys had mentioned the other day that you're interested in learning more specifically about the presidential candidates, the two that are now our candidates, because we already have the primaries, and they decided that Biden, the primaries and the votes basically in the primaries decided that Biden's going to be our main candidate for the Democratic side. So you guys asked for a little more information about the candidates. So I put together some information yesterday that hopefully will help. I have a couple disclaimers. This is some information that I gathered from the best sites I could find in terms of credibility. So we've talked a lot about credibility and reliability when looking at internet websites. So I went to ones that seemed as unbiased as possible, just giving the facts, just about their policies and what kind of things that they stand for. If it was a website that had a lot of opinions and making it seem very, swayed toward one direction or the other, I didn't take data from them because I don't trust a site that gives a lot of biased information. So I did my best to make this as unbiased as possible. I'm sure, we've all talked about our different political views. You guys know mainly where I land for the most part, but I really did do my best to make this unbiased, and I guess trying to keep my opinion out of it. So if that it does not reflect that, I apologize. I definitely did my best. So just to kind of start out, do you guys have any questions that you want to make sure get answered before we go into kind of different policies with Biden and Trump? Is there anything specific that you guys want to know? Give you a second to answer.
The tough part about this is the ones that asked for this class are not here.
Hang on, Emma just messaged me.
So Trump's running for Republican again?
He sure is.
How many more times can he run though?
This will be his second and last time he's able to run. So he had one full term. He's about to finish up his first term, and a term is 4 years. And you were able to serve as president for two full terms. So you can do 8 full years.
8 years.
Yes, and then you're done. So this is his second term that he's running for. And obviously hoping that he gets it. It's not super common for people to not get a second term. A lot of presidents historically have gotten the 2 full terms, and they'll win again and then serve their 8 full years. But there's a lot in the air this year, and there's a lot of things that have happened this year that might make it so that he does not win again. But there's a lot of different polls out there and things that say different things. Oh, I can't admit, Emma. Wow, this is really annoying.
Why is somebody trying?
So we're just we don't know what's gonna happen. You can only predict so much. But we're just gonna talk about some things so that you guys can be informed voters, because you are all over the age of 18 and able to vote, and therefore you hopefully will choose to vote. So that's something I'm gonna push no matter what. I don't care what you believe in. I just believe that it's really important to vote. We've talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
So, stupid thing's not letting me join Emma. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, let me know. You're welcome to speak up. But I kind of compiled a list of some of the main concerns that people look at before they choose to vote, before they decide who they're going to vote on. And there's a list here that I kind of created just based on some of the policies that you hear and based on some of the things that most people are concerned about. So big one is the economy, job growth, making sure that the unemployment rate is low, especially post-pandemic. So this is a new thing. It's pretty new to have a pandemic. That's not something that we're used to, and it's definitely going to impact probably what kind of things you're going to vote for, right? So this pandemic is a brand new sort of situation that we have to deal with, and a lot of people are concerned about it, and they're going to be looking at who they think is going to handle this best now. Come November when we have to vote, do you think Biden's going to handle that better? Or do you think Trump's going to handle that better, right? That's going to be a big piece of this now. Another big piece is climate change and caring for the environment. A lot of people, there's a big talk about the federal minimum wage. Immigration is another one. Taxes, healthcare and insurance costs, foreign policy, which is harder to discuss. There's a lot of complicated aspects of foreign policy little bit. And then Roe v. Wade. Does anyone know what Roe v. Wade is?
Nope.
No idea what Roe v. Wade is?
Nope.
It is, these people aren't, I'm not letting them in. It is the case, the court case that decided that abortion would be legal. So Roe v. Wade, if you ever hear on the news that people are talking about protecting Roe v. Wade, it's the court case that decided that abortion would be legal to some extent in the U.S. So when people talk about protecting Roe v. Wade, it's protecting the right to get an abortion.
Well, isn't it in some countries, isn't it like still illegal to have abortions?
Definitely in some states in the U.S.
Like-
some people,
don't they
wanna have-
literally?
Sorry, Evan, go ahead, speak.
They have these carrier things that make babies now, right? So like, don't they just do a C-section and just cut out and put it in that weird fetus thing or whatever it's called?
Not
what?
really. Not really. That's not really how it works.
No?
I don't know about other countries. I probably should pay closer attention, but I don't know about the laws in other countries. I just know about here.
Yeah.
For the most part, and some states are different than others. Some states are more lenient on their laws with abortion. Some states are a lot more strict about it because states do have some of their own jurisdiction. There's a separation between state laws and federal laws, and that's purposeful. Hang on, let me respond to Emma really quick. I don't know what's happening with Zoom. It's not letting me let some people in, and it lets me let others in, and I just don't know. Okay, so we're gonna kind of do this a little bit at a time. It's a lot of text. I don't have any pictures on here or anything, but we're just gonna kind of go through one at a time and compare the two policies. So
Okay.
Biden is in blue because blue is the color that they've chosen for Democrats, and red is the color that they've chosen for Republicans. So Biden and Trump, Democratic nominee and the Republican nominee. So Biden has discussed a lot about increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour. That's the federal minimum wage. So that means that everywhere the states have to abide by at least a $15 minimum wage, no matter what job you have. Right now it's $7.25 is the federal minimum wage. So that means
$7.25?
$7.25, $7.25 an hour is the federal minimum wage. That's what the minimum wage is in Idaho, for example.
Oh, okay. Because I was
So-
saying out here is like 11,
Washington
12,
is
but-
13, right? Washington is 13 and a half is Washington's minimum wage.
Okay.
And so the states, some of the states get to decide. So the states get to decide, but they have to at least abide by the federal minimum wage. So
why are they
Biden
only
is
raising
talking
it by,
about,
like,
hang on,
$2?
Biden is talking about increasing the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. That means that the states have to at least do $15 an hour. They can do more if they'd like. Okay. I tried to research in terms of Trump's opinion on this, and I didn't see a lot. It sounds like he's not necessarily not open to the possibility of doing that. He's brought up $10 instead of $15 an hour, but he's not totally sold on the $15 an hour. So there's a lot of pros and cons to increasing the minimum wage.
That's why we need to stop raising it.
Okay,
feel-
so you have an opinion that you need to stop raising it. Why do you have that opinion, Jacob?
I feel like everything else like goes up when they raise the minimum wage.
Well,
mean-
yeah, the buses are like $2 and something cents now.
Because when I was at an apartment when they raised the minimum wage, everything went up. They tried raising all the rents, but I kind of just got a deal with my manager because I was already renting from them. So like everything, I don't know. I feel like I watch everything go up, and if you're not renting places and all that shit, you don't really feel it. But
Right. So that's one of the cons that they've talked about when increasing the minimum wage. It's if you have to pay your workers that much more, then everything's going to cost more, right? Because you have to be able to pay people. You have to be able to pay your employees enough money. So the cost of items, the cost of labor is going to go up. So you're going to pay more for things like getting your car fixed. You're going to pay more for a burger. If you go and eat at a restaurant, you're going to pay more, right? Because a lot of restaurant workers get minimum wage. Wow, this is really not letting me let Emma in. That's really frustrating.
And I mean, you know, like, what about, you know, when it comes to, there's people out there, you know, not necessarily saying us, but I've seen people, you know, like pretty pissed off about, you know, like they've worked their ass off going through training programs, getting certifications for all their jobs to get paid a certain amount. And now people are out here working McDonald's and shit, getting paid as much as they are. Which I feel it. I mean, I honestly, like, unless you want to go get out of working burgers and stuff, I mean, I feel like you should be making at least the $12 that they used to have it. That seems fair. I mean, or whatever. I don't know. But
Okay, so you believe maybe 15 is a lot, but we should raise it maybe a little bit at least?
15 is a lot. I mean, I feel like $15 an hour is like, you know, like starting out in a training program for construction, you know, like us. But that's
Right.
like what Flip Burgers is going to be these days. And then people like that, like us, going through training programs and everything are going to be making like $1 or $2 more than them people. Hey, Bentley, stop. Sorry.
Yeah, so you've definitely raised pretty much all of the concerns that people have about raising the minimum wage. Some people think maybe you don't deserve it. There are some people in that work in restaurants and fast food that argue that they have to deal with a lot, and they would, you know, it's still a job and it's still something that's, I mean, people are going to get burgers every day, right? So it's a necessity, and especially something we've decided in the midst of a pandemic that our restaurant and fast food workers are considered essential workers, because they've stayed open so that people can continue to eat. And so now I think the pandemic has raised a whole new argument about, well, you said that this wasn't a very important job before, but we were considered essential workers. So how important are we really, right? So I should get paid to compensate for the amount of work that we do in dealing with customers and staying open during a pandemic and all this. So there are definitely a lot of sides to the story. And Jacob, you've basically brought up every con that there is about raising the minimum wage. So it's definitely a controversial issue, and that's why I mean, they wouldn't bring it up if it wasn't controversial, right? I think that there are a lot of pros and a lot of cons to increasing minimum wage.
And I do think it really comes down to like what you want the minimum wage to be. Like $12 an hour. So if you're making minimum wage in Washington, $12 an hour, that would be about, after taxes, per month you're making probably a little bit under $1,500, so $1,500. In most places, like on the west side, you can't find an apartment for less than $1,000 a month. It's extremely difficult to find something cheaper than that. And then you're left with $500 if you have a car payment.
It's just going up.
You have insurance, you have food, you have anything that's eaten away. That's not really enough in Washington to support a basic standard of living. Now, if you look nationally at like the 725, the per month for that after tax is like $850 a month. There's like no place in the country where you can live off of $850 a month if you have to pay rent, right? And also considering like most of the jobs that are paying minimum wage aren't full time. And the numbers that I just gave you are for working those minimum wage jobs full time. And so you're not able to support a basic standard of living on that pay. So,
right.
When minimum wage, I believe when minimum wage was $12, I was at an apartment on Augusta and I was paying like $650. Mm-hmm. And that was around what I was seeing for all 1-bedroom apartments at that time. Minimum wage.
And that's what mine was.
Minimum wage.
Though.
And then they tried raising it to like, they tried raising rent on me in this tiny 1-bedroom to like $800. I was like, what the hell?
I know, even costs in Spokane are going up.
Yeah.
And the costs in Spokane, and that's not even really due to the minimum wage increase for the prices of housing increasing in Spokane. It's all the people that are moving into Spokane.
That's true,
and the prices on the west side, those prices have been skyrocketing as well. But I mean, in both cases, the minimum wage isn't enough. But you're right. For a while, that $12 an hour, if your rent is $600 a month and you and your significant other are making $12 an hour working full time, yeah, you can manage that living. But in most cases, you're not able to.
Right. Yeah, I was just saying, I watched it go up on me, and they tried raising my rent in a tiny ass 1-bedroom. And I said, fuck that, and ended up getting a way better deal for a 2-bedroom.
Now, I know in my 1-bedroom, I'm paying almost $800 now. And when I first moved in, this was almost 4 years ago, it was like $580 when I first got this apartment.
Wow. You're
Wow.
paying, oh wow, that's crazy.
And
Damn.
my rent is I think it's like $770 right now.
Oh man, that's wild.
Insane. So yeah, there are a lot of reasons why, I mean, people believe they need a living wage. $7.25 right now is federal minimum wage. There's no, I mean, that is 100% of your rent, of your money would go to rent in Seattle if you're getting paid $7.25.
More than
right?
100%.
More than 100%, right? And so there are a lot of places that are like, I literally cannot live on this. You at least need to give me a wage so I can survive, so that I can have a roof over my head, because we all have the right to prosper, right? That's what it says in the Constitution. And so then you need to be able to pay me enough so that I can survive. I can have a roof over my head and I can eat food. And so that's really what it's coming down to, is a human rights issue at this point. But of course, the Washington minimum wage was $13.50, and so they've already raised it because they know how much it costs to live in Washington State. So anyway, we're going to move on because we have a lot of things to talk about, but definitely something to consider. Biden is talking about something called the College for All Act. So it's essentially free college, undergraduate university, so like a bachelor's degree, for students and families that make less than $125,000 a year. So that is a really good portion of people that, I mean, a huge portion of the lower to middle class make $125,000 or less annually. And so a lot of people would fall under this College for All Act, where you could go to a state college and get a bachelor's degree for free. And so they're talking about everybody has a right to higher education now, and so that you don't, my bachelor's degree was $50,000 a year. So I only went there for 2 years because I did community college first because of how expensive it is. But I have $100,000 in loans because I wanted a bachelor's degree. And so that makes it so that not everybody is, it's a privilege to go get your degree, when in reality there are a lot of higher paying jobs. And they're saying that there's a right to have an education beyond high school. And so just like they made high school free, you don't have to pay to go to most high schools unless you go to a private school. They're saying that we can make all state colleges free for people who want a bachelor's degree if you make, under $25,000 a year. So that's, in a nutshell. It's obviously very much more complicated than a one-sentence description, but in a nutshell, that's what the College for All Act is. On Trump's side, he hasn't really mentioned much about education in terms of K through 12 or anything about paying for higher education. So there's not a lot that they've talked about really. Biden has also talked about an increase of funding to K through 12 schools in order to pay teachers more, enhance preschool programs, etc. So his goal is to pump quite a bit of money into schools, higher education and K through 12 schools. And Trump doesn't have a lot on it. I really did search for information on this on Trump's side, and it hasn't been a priority on his side. So if education is a big deal for you, that's something to look at. Let's talk about healthcare, because there's quite a bit.
Sorry, my phone died.
That's all right. Thanks for coming back. It's been a hot topic on how we should handle healthcare in the U.S. I know that if you are a healthcare student here, you have done quite a bit of Google Classroom work, and we've talked a lot about the different countries and how they run their healthcare systems compared to the U.S. And I think the general consensus is that the U.S. healthcare system is very broken. And that there are a lot of issues in terms of paying for health insurance, and health insurance doesn't even cover hardly anything, and you have really high deductibles that you have to pay for most of your health care anyways out of pocket. And in general, it's well known that the US healthcare system is very broken. And so what are we going to do to reform that, right? People are looking at this, I want to survive, I have the right to survive, and if I break my leg and I take an ambulance and it costs me $5,000 and now all of a sudden I'm bankrupt because I broke my leg, people are saying that that's not going to work for them anymore. So what are they going to do? Biden here on the left side, remember this is Biden on the left. He has talked not as crazy of reform as you were hearing from like Bernie Sanders and doing the Medicare for all, the kind of free healthcare for all. He's not all the way on board with that. He wants to keep private insurance companies mainly intact so that you would still have the private insurance companies that you could choose. But he's trying to increase the availability of the Affordable Care Act, which is Obamacare, if you guys remember hearing about that, which basically makes it so that everybody has access to healthcare in terms of Medicaid. So he wants to increase availability to that, make it more affordable for you to get healthcare, but he doesn't want to completely leave the private insurance company system. He wants to still make it so that it's your choice. Over here we have Trump's side on healthcare. He has already taken a lot of steps. This is kind of different because Trump has already taken steps to some of his policies, but he has already started to undo Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act. So he erased the individual mandate, which means that you were taxed if you didn't have health care. I don't know if any of you guys were a part of that before Trump was in office, but if you did not have health care, then they taxed you when you went in and filed your taxes. You got money taken out of your tax refund if you did not have health care that year. So it's kind of this incentive for you to have health care is the big piece of the Affordable Care Act and why Trump wanted to get rid of it. He also says he wants to cut drug prices and reform Medicaid. For him, that means he wants more freedom in choosing healthcare options, so less regulation on insurance companies. Let insurance companies do their thing. The government shouldn't be a part of it. They should just compete with each other, and you should, be able to choose what healthcare you have. And he also has he's already started this, and he wants to encourage this more, but he's implemented work requirements for individuals to receive Medicaid. So it means that you have to be working at least like a certain number of hours per week in order to qualify for Medicaid. And the goal of this is to scale back on Medicaid spending. So Biden wants to increase our Medicaid spending and make it more available, and Trump is saying we need to kind of cut down on Medicaid spending so we can use that money elsewhere. So he's making it kind of harder to access Medicaid while still keeping the individual insurance company intact. How am I doing? Do we have any questions? I know this is a lot of dense information. I'm going to post this to the Facebook group so you guys have more information. But are there any questions so far on what we've talked about? We've talked about education and healthcare so far. Any questions?
Weird. Trump sounds a lot better. I mean, the other guy sounds better than Trump. Like, he wants to help people. Freaking, like, because, I don't know, people that are, like, really broke that can't afford the college and whatnot, right? They're always going to be broke because they can't afford the college. And so he's pretty much just making it to where people that are super broke, eventually their families won't be broke one day. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and remember, we all have the right to prosper. We all have the right to seek success.
I dig that guy.
Cool.
So yeah, accessing college will help you prosper and be successful. And so if you're poor now and you can't afford college, then you're never going to get to a position where you can make more money to bring yourself out of being in poverty. Or it's not never, but it's very difficult.
Right. Exactly. So his goal is to make that education free so that it's not a privilege to go to college, right? If you can't afford it, you can't go. That's how it is right now. So he's saying, no, that's not how it should work. Even if you're in poverty, even if you can't afford college, we're going to make it free so that you could still get that education and therefore earn a much higher wage. In general, the majority of people who go to college, there's a very intact trend. The higher the education you have, the higher the money you make, right? That's in general, that's pretty much how it works. So it's an effort to be able to pull people out of poverty without making them, essentially go bankrupt. If you have $200,000 of loans, that's just not something that everybody has access to. So.
But I can also, on that side, I can understand why people would be against that, because
where's that money going to come from?
Exactly. Somebody has to pay for that. And so the ones that end up paying for it are the people who are working in those higher paying jobs because they're being taxed. And their tax money is going to pay for the education of other people. I can kind of understand why somebody would be annoyed that their tax money is going to pay for somebody else's education.
Right. Because that money will come out of taxes. That's the only way we're going to be able to pay for everybody to go to college for free, because somebody's got to pay for it, right? It still does cost money to pay instructors. It costs money to have buildings to go to school, right? It costs money to have textbooks. It costs money to create textbooks. And so the taxpayers will be paying for it. And so it might increase our taxes. And so, yeah, that's kind of why people aren't totally for it. But then you have this other side where it's like, well, but more people will be able to prosper. So kind of where it depends on where your interests lie and how you're going to vote for this.
You know what annoys me is like, why are they going to be so booty tickled to pay for somebody else's education when they're paying to house inmates? They're paying to house child molesters. They're paying to house murderers. They're paying to, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're going to be
tax dollars go to the prison system.
Yeah, if you're going to be that booty tickled on paying for somebody's education, why not be booty tickled on paying for somebody that doesn't deserve to be free? You know what I'm saying?
That's a really good perspective, Travis.
Preach it, Travis.
I appreciate that perspective.
It just annoys me. I'm like, I don't know.
I like that. So, like, why are people's priorities, not in that same place? I get that.
And my perspective on it is, okay, so say I'm the person that's getting college for free. Okay, I'm benefiting from other people paying for my college. But once I am able to make it on my own, then my money goes to pay for the next generation.
Yeah.
That's true. You'll pay it back.
So it becomes like a cycle.
You'll pay it back once you are able to make that money because you got your education. It'll just pull out of your taxes now. And you'll pay for the next generation. You're so right, Alex.
And then we'll all be in nice houses with nice cars. With good jobs.
Or at least having the opportunity to prosper, right, and make more than minimum wage. Even if minimum wage is $15 an hour, I mean, that's great, but there's still opportunity, if you get a higher education, there's opportunity for you to make even more than that. So definitely. Okay, thank you for, if I go too fast, please stop me, ask questions. This is like really dense information. We're literally looking at text. I recognize that. So, okay. Biden has a kind of a specific housing agenda for people in poverty. So his interest is to increase availability to Section 8 housing program so that we have more money basically in the Section 8 housing program so that more people who qualify will get it. Basically, if you qualify for Section 8 housing, you're going to get it. Right now, the system that's in place is about 25% of the people who qualify for Section 8 housing actually receive any assistance. So that means 75% of people who qualify don't get any assistance in terms of Section 8 HUD housing. So his goal is to make it that if you qualify, you're going to get assistance. That's his goal, basically putting a lot more money into the Section 8 housing system. And he also wants to reduce barriers to housing construction so that we can have more houses available. The more houses we have, the more people can go into those houses, right? And we have less people in poverty, less people who are homeless. So he has a pretty specific housing agenda that will potentially support people who are in poverty. I couldn't find anything. Yes.
I feel like what you're reading is going to make Spokane look better.
I mean, that's the goal. Do you mean in terms of our homeless rate in Spokane?
Yeah, dude.
Pretty high?
Without a bunch of tweakers on the side of the road, they'll probably be actually wanting to do more with themselves, to be honest. And then the next generation of people that might end up like that probably won't.
Potentially. I mean, I think part of his goal is to reduce homelessness. We don't have enough houses for the amount of people, or we don't have enough houses that are livable, right? I'm sure you've noticed in Spokane as we're working on some of those houses, but a lot of houses aren't livable because they've been abandoned and now they're, falling down. And so they want to be able to build more houses, reduce some of that red tape on housing construction to make it easier for us to restore and build houses for more people to live in. So that's kind of his goal. He has a very specific housing agenda. So Trump didn't have a specific housing agenda, but he kind of talked a little bit about, I could find things about taxes, which is kind of relating because Section 8 housing, you're going to pay for that by taxing people, right? So if there's something where they want to pump more money into it, it basically means that money is going to come out of taxpayers' dollars, which we're already paying pretty high taxes. He's saying he wants to move around some of the money that they're already pulling for taxes and emphasize it on education and housing availability and all that. Doesn't necessarily mean you're just not going to have a paycheck because there's taxing it so much. It just means he wants to prioritize some of that money. So Trump has already changed some of the tax laws a little bit. I'm sure you know because of our new W-4 form that we filled out, right? We filled out a new W-4 form that was very strange, to me at least. It's very different now. But he has a new tax plan. In general, Trump's new tax plan lowers taxes for the middle class, and he increased the child tax credit by $1,000. So I remember, Bailey, I think you're in here. I remember you were like, my tax return had like an extra couple $1,000s than you were used to. And it's because he increased the child tax credit. You get an extra $1,000 than you're used to for each child that you have. So he's already changed the tax structure a little bit. His goal is to basically reduce taxes. He doesn't want to tax people. He doesn't want to tax corporations as much. He doesn't want to tax people in higher and middle class as much. He believes in low taxes all around. And he says, and this is a quote I found in one of the articles, but deregulation of business spurs economic growth. So he says if you take the government out of corporations and out of businesses, then our economy will grow faster because they're able to make their own choices. They're able to grow themselves faster if you're not taxing them and regulating them so much. So that's kind of Trump's policy on taxes. And you can kind of see that's definitely not the policy of Biden. Biden has a lot of plans for tax dollars, and potentially some of this would mean that he would increase tax money. He would increase taxes in order to pay for things like this, our education plan, in order to pay for this new housing agenda he has. So when it comes to taxes, they have very opposite views. Trump says less taxes, and Biden says more taxes so we can pay for more things. Okay, that's kind of in a nutshell. They're differing opinions, and it can kind of help you decide who you want to vote for based on your opinions in that area. Does that make sense? You following me? Alex, if I don't explain something right, please stop me and tell me.
No, you're doing good. And the thing I want to emphasize is a lot of this comes down to your own personal philosophy of how your tax money should be used.
Totally.
Like for me personally, I'm okay being taxed higher if that money is going to be used in a way that I agree with. If it's going to be used to fix streets, if it's going to be used to help people that need it get into housing, I'm okay with that personally.
Mm-hmm.
But I also respect the person who is not okay with that. And that is their personal choice to be not okay with that. And that is totally fine.
Yeah. So like what I'm getting off of is like, so basically Biden is trying to, so like when I make a check, say I make a check for $1,100 and then I get the check that's before taxes and it's like say $900 and after taxes. So like what you're saying is like if Biden becomes president, like that'll go from like 800 to like what, 700 to 600?
Not necessarily. So
Not
Biden,
even.
not even. So Biden's plan, I didn't explain this very well. Biden's plan is not necessarily to be like everybody gets taxed 50% and you're only going to get 50% of your income. And I mean, it's not necessarily that he's going to take more money from you. He's just saying he's going to prioritize some of that money for different things than what they're used on now. So you still have taxes. I mean, taxes are the only way that the government is really able to pay for things. So Trump says less taxes, but he knows that you can't just not have any taxes, right? Because it's how we pay for certain things. It's how we fix roads. It's how we build schools. It's necessary, right? And so Biden is saying, okay, well, let's not lower the taxes. Maybe taxes will increase in some areas, but for the most part, he's saying, let's stop spending so much money on things like our military spending. He's not all for pumping a bunch of money into the military, for example. So instead of the amount of money that goes to the military right now, he's going to take that money and he's going to reallocate it. He's going to redistribute it and put it toward our schools and our Section 8 housing program instead. So it's not necessarily that he's going to take more money from you. He's just going to change where the money goes. He might take a little more money, depending on, especially if we save free college.
Would it be used for more educational purposes?
I would rather my tax money.
Biden's plan is a lot more pumped into education.
I'd rather my tax monies to go to education than a damn park. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah. And there are some taxes that are always going to go toward parks. In order to keep them up. It's how we pay for people to mow the lawn and keep up on our parks so that they're able to be used by our kids. So there are some taxes that will always go toward things like parks and roads. But he's saying that we need more taxes to go toward things like making sure that people have a roof over their head and making sure that people can get an education. Those are the things. There are other things, but these are the things I have highlighted, and we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. So I highlighted some of the main things. So those are some of the main things that he's saying he's going to use tax money for. So it might increase our taxes. If we do free college, you might see your taxes go up a little bit. But it's not like you're going to go from taking 15% to taking 50% of your income, right? They know that that's not feasible, and that people wouldn't go for that. I mean, I don't want 50% of my income to be my check, right? I need money so that I can live too. So it's this very delicate balance of taking taxes so that other people can survive, but not taking so much so that you can't survive. it's a balance, right? Yeah, Alex, go for it.
Yeah, and so at worst, maybe you're looking at the difference between 10% and 12%, for example.
Totally.
And then, but a lot of that money to fund the stuff that Biden's talking about, kind of what Lily was saying, is redistributing who's paying taxes and who's paying what amount.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of corporations that are not paying any taxes. A corporation like Amazon, who pays no income taxes and are making billions in profit every year. It's taxing organizations who are making money off of the people and putting that money back in to educating the people.
Totally. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, you're so right.
Amazon doesn't pay taxes? How does that work?
Amazon often gets money. Amazon often gets a refund, like you would get a refund, rather than actually paying any taxes into the system, because of the tax structure that is in place. The tax structure that is in place give lots of tax breaks to major corporations, in order to kind of keep corporations happy with the government, because the government makes money off of corporations. So instead of taxing corporations and using that money to benefit the society and building roads and building schools, they're saying let's keep corporations happy with the government, in sort of a very simple way to say it.
But I want to emphasize, it goes back to your own personal philosophy.
Yes.
Some people would say, hey, that corporation, they earned that money. They deserve to keep it. They deserve to put that money back into their organization to build it up even further.
Off-brand stuff, that makes no sense to me.
Right.
They just sell items. Like, that makes, I don't get it. That just makes, God, this society confuses the hell out of me.
It confuses me too. I am trying my best. Again, we're all biased and we all have our own opinions. But I will say I don't agree with this. I think that corporations that make billions of dollars, they need to put some of that money back into society so that we can pay for things like education.
That's what I'm saying.
Make sure that people have a roof over their head. That's just me. It's not the opinion that everybody has. Some people are like, well, that corporation needs that money in order to continue to grow. Because if that company grows, then they're going to have more jobs and the economy is going to boost, because that corporation is really big and able to, give a lot of people jobs and put a lot of money into the economy. So they're saying, should that money stay in the economy with the corporations, or should some of that money be taken out and given to some of our social services programs like Section, and be given to our schools and make it so that everybody affords education? So it's really this, what's your priority, right? Is your priority the economy and job growth? Is your priority education and Section 8 housing, right? So it's, the money's there. Money does not just go away. It just depends on where it's at. And the government gets to decide where it shifts. And you get to decide based on who you vote on about where that money's going to go, right? It's so much more complicated than the way that I'm describing it, but this is the kind of simplest term that I can use, I guess. Okay, do we feel good? Do we feel good about moving on to the next subject?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Taxes are like a really complicated part. Okay, a less complicated part is environmental issues. So this, again, left is Biden and right is Trump over here. So on the left, Biden is talking about his goal of going carbon neutral by 2050. And carbon neutral means that essentially for every carbon molecule that is emitted into the ozone layer, the economy does something to offset it. So for example, plant a tree, or give back in some way, or donate a bunch of money to ecological research. So it's saying that for all of the coal that you're burning, what are you doing to offset that by either donating money to research or planting trees or whatever it may be, in order to kind of offset the damage that you're doing to the environment. So his plan is to go carbon neutral by 2050, right? He's not going to be in office in 2050, even if he's in office this year. So he has to have more of a short-term goal in order to achieve that. And he is kind of going off of the Green New Deal that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right? Did I say that right? That she put out there in terms of making sure that we are taxing corporations if they are using coal, making sure that we are limiting our use of fossil fuels, because when we burn fossil fuels, we are damaging the environment by putting too much carbon into the air, and therefore hurting our ozone layer, hurting our oceans. And so there's this Green New Deal policy that's basically going to incentivize corporations and other big businesses to use more sustainable energy, like solar power, for example, or wind power, for example. These kind of reusable resources and things that we can basically just more sustainable, easier to use, and don't emit any carbon greenhouse gas. So he has definitely a goal. Biden has a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and go carbon neutral. Okay.
So like
Trump's
stopping
side,
sawmills and stuff.
part of it is that because they often run on fossil fuels, but there, I mean, other corporations corporations use like coal for energy because it's so cheap. So it's a lot cheaper than installing solar panels. It's a lot cheaper than some of this other energy, wind energy, water energy that we use. It's a lot cheaper to just burn coal because coal is really cheap. But
Yeah.
it's really bad for the environment. And so it's kind of this, they're trying to incentivize people by taxing them, taking money from them if they use burn coal or burn oil, fossil fuels. They say, we're going to take money from you if you do that, to incentivize you to use solar energy or some other sort of sustainable energy. Because if you're going to pay that money anyways because you're being taxed, you might as well just use this sustainable energy, right? So they're trying to get companies to use more sustainable energy is really the goal. So Trump has very opposite views in terms of environment. This is a place where they have very opposite ideas. Trump believes that the coal industry and the fossil fuel industry is boosting the economy. And so he believes, and that's not necessarily not true, he just believes that the economy is more important than not burning coal and not burning fossil fuels. He believes that we need to keep the jobs where the coal is, keep the jobs where the fossil fuel is, because it's important to keep our economy up and running in that area. So he withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord, or the Paris Climate Agreement, which is basically a global agreement between countries that they're going to do their best to go carbon neutral by 2050. They're going to do their best to limit carbon emissions. And Trump said, nah, I don't want anything to do with that. And he withdrew the US from the Paris Climate Agreement a couple years ago, which was very controversial. I don't know if you ever saw anything on the news, but people were kind of upset about it. Other countries were very upset about it. And so he's saying, it doesn't matter. We don't need to worry about our carbon emissions. We need to focus on the economy. And therefore, greenhouse gas emissions, it doesn't matter. We need to keep money in the coal and the fossil fuel industry. So that's just another, where do your priorities lie, right? Are you really worried about the economy and making sure we have jobs in the coal and fossil fuel industry? Or do you care about not emitting carbon or greenhouse gas emissions or things like that? It really depends on where your own opinions lie on who you're going to vote for in terms of the environment. Did I lose anybody? Does that make sense?
It does not make a lot of sense at all.
Okay, where are you lost?
At the part when you said, actually pretty much lost at the beginning of it.
So are you confused about Trump's policies or Biden's policies on the environment? Where are you finding it confusing?
Biden's, though. He's not going to be there by 2050.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. So his long-term goal, if he were in the presidency, is to work toward this goal of being carbon neutral by 2050. He's not going to be there by 2050, right? But he's hoping that during his term, whether he does 4 years or 8 years or however long he will be in the presidency, he's hoping that he will increase the ability to get carbon neutral by 2050. So he's just hoping to contribute to that. He knows that he's not going to be in office by 2050. I mean, he's an old guy. He might not even be alive until 2050. But his goal is to work toward that and be a part of that solution. Trump, it doesn't like that solution. He doesn't agree with that solution. And so he agrees with keeping money in the coal industry, right? And so they have very differing views. Trump doesn't care if we go carbon neutral by 2050. That's his opinion. And Biden is trying to work toward that. So he knows he won't see it, but he's just working toward it. Does that make more sense?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Again, I'm going to post this to the Facebook group so you guys can kind of look at it and maybe do some research on your own if you wanted to. I know it's so much dense information to go through. I get that. And it's past the math class time, so I'm going to try and wrap this up so that you guys can get to class. But in terms of unions, I wanted to put this in here because I know that a lot of you guys are working on going to the laborers union or other sort of jobs that might require unionizing or talk about unionizing. So they also have pretty opposite opinions in terms of unionizing. This is Biden's side over here. His goal is to protect and advocate for union workers. And so he makes it easier, like his goal is to make it easier to unionize. And so there are a lot of companies that right now will penalize or potentially even fire an employee that talks about unionizing if they don't want them to unionize. And so his goal is to make it so that people who want to unionize are protected and they're not going to get fired from their jobs. Okay. And just, right. So like a laborers union, for example, it has a union, a worker, a union of workers. That's what I'm trying to say.
So
and
like
so
when
it's
they go
like,
on strike or no?
no, I mean, if you work for a laborers union, Alex, can you help me explain this? I'm so bad at explaining unionizing. I'm terrible at it.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
We're talking about unionizing. Can you explain unionizing and why a corporation might not want them to unionize? I'm not explaining this well at all.
So when you create a union, I'll be with you. Okay. Sorry guys, I had somebody talking to me for a sec. When you create a union that is created by the workers, and that union is there to protect the workers, it's to advocate for them. If a worker gets injured, that union will help fight for their benefits. If that worker becomes disabled, the union will help fight to get them benefits for that as well. And then in exchange, each of the workers are paying union dues. They're paying a certain amount out of their paychecks to support that union to keep it strong, because it's to protect the workers, right? But there's a lot of people who would say, look, a union isn't really doing that much for me, but they're taking money out of my paycheck, so it's a pain in the ass. In terms of the corporation, so like a company like Amazon does not want its workers to unionize, because what a union would do for Amazon's workers is to start advocating for higher pay for those workers or for hazard pay if they get hurt. And what does that do? That just costs Amazon even more money in the long term. So that's why large corporations do not want unions to start, being commonplace. So again, it's back to your own personal philosophy on that. Who has that ultimate decision in terms of unions, right?
Yeah.
Do the workers need those extra protections? Can we trust that a corporation like Amazon will have the best interest of its workers in mind in the long term? Will it protect them out of its own goodwill? Or do we need another organization to step in on behalf of workers to protect them? So that's kind of the two ideas that you need to have in your head in terms of unions. So when we're looking at like the unions that we've worked with, like the laborers, the union is there to help the laborers, one, find work with organizations, and they're only going to put the workers with organizations that are going to guarantee their workers a certain level of pay and protection in case they get injured on the job. Because when you're working in construction, you have a lot more hazards that could affect you. But because you're also paying union dues, you're not getting as much as if you were working for an organization that does not have your back. Right. So you kind of think, okay, when am I being taken advantage of, right? Some people would say that the union is taking advantage of them because they don't feel like they're doing enough for them and they're just taking money out of their paycheck every month. Or other people would say that the corporation is taking advantage of them because they're paying them as little as they possibly can and they can fire them whenever they feel like it.
Right.
I hope that didn't.
That was so much better than how I was explaining it. Thank you. So really, I mean, what Biden and Trump are trying to say, Biden is saying, I want to protect the workers. I want to protect their right to unionize. I want to make it harder for them to get fired if they talk about unionizing, because it's easy if a small Amazon distribution site in Arkansas says, let's unionize because we want better pay. Amazon has the right to shut down that branch because they don't want people unionizing. So, okay, we're just going to lay everyone off. And if you're going to unionize, then we'll get rid of you. Right?
Amazon just did that recently.
Oh, did they?
They fired a whole group of people because they were talking about unionizing.
There you go. they don't want you to unionize because you're going to advocate for better pay, like what Alex was saying. It's going to cost more for Amazon if you unionize.
Because a union would not let Amazon take advantage of this work.
Right, and unions have rights separate from a corporation. The government has said unions have separate rights. They're able to advocate for themselves and protect themselves. And so a lot of companies don't want you to unionize, right? And so Biden is saying, let's protect the workers. Let's protect their right to unionize. I want to make sure that people are able to do that and not lose their job. And Trump is saying, let's protect the corporations, make it harder to unionize, and gives kind of agencies more discretion in order to, I guess, institute disciplinary action against workers who do try to unionize. So Biden is saying advocate for the workers. Trump is saying advocate for the corporations. It's just wherever your interests lie in terms of who you side with on that one. Okay, let's move on. That was a lot of information. Do you have a question?
So it's like about control, basically.
In a way, yeah. It's either do you want the workers to have more control or do you want the corporation to have more control in order to protect the corporation? Right?
I prefer the workers.
Okay. I mean, some people would say, yeah, let's protect the workers, and some people say it's important that we protect the corporation and their ability to thrive.
And you know, some people would say that the corporation would have, or sorry, the union would have too much control in that partnership. So. Right, and then they would have too much control in dictating how the corporation ran. And so there are definitely two sides to the story, and it just depends on where your interests lie, right? And there's, like I said, there are some unions that have been fantastic. Other unions, I'd be like, yeah, no, I don't want you. I don't want to be part of you. So. Yep, there are better ones than others. That's definitely true. Okay, let's wrap this up. This is my last little section here. I have a little thing on problems, but this is my last little bit. Very quick note on. You say Alex or Lily?
Alex.
Got it.
Yeah, sure. I got a bunch of people I need to call after this, but I'll get to you, man.
I'll wait for you to call me.
Okay, let me just make a note.
Continue, Lily.
Okay, immigration, very opposite policy structure, as you'll see with a lot of this. Biden is wanting to reverse some of the Trump policies. So Trump has, done an emergency fund to build the wall. He has specifically pointed out the detaining children part at the U.S.-Mexico border. And Trump has cracked down on illegal immigrants accessing social services like Section 8 housing, food stamps, things like that. Trump has expressed supporting Dreamers, which are the young people who, it's a whole nother thing. Honestly, I don't have time to explain Dreamers. I'm not going to do it. I'm trying to rush this. So Biden wants to reverse some of the Trump policies and establish an easier path to citizenship for those who have been waiting in Mexico. They can take a really long time.
I think we're kind of losing you, Lily.
Uh-oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, but we lost you for a good couple seconds there.
Okay.
But immigration might be something, if you guys are really interested, Lily will talk about it real briefly now, but we could do a whole discussion on just immigration.
We totally can, because it's a much more, all of these are complicated subjects, but immigration especially. So basically Biden wants to make it somewhat easier to access citizenship and not make them wait decades and decades to get citizenship. He also wants to reverse some Trump policies that have already been in place in the last 3 years. Trump obviously wants to keep his policies in place. He wants to reduce illegal immigration and also make it a little bit harder to immigrate legally. So make it more difficult to claim asylum or more difficult to claim citizenship if you're fleeing your country. He has a zero tolerance policy, which has resulted in what you've probably heard of with the separation of families. So having parents basically separated from their children because he has a zero tolerance policy in terms of immigrating. He also is trying to establish a merit-based system to determine who becomes citizens. So based on their skill set, if they could become good workers that contribute to the economy, that will determine if they are granted citizenship or not, rather than being like, oh, my dad immigrated here, so let me just be with him. He's saying you need to have merit in order to immigrate. And he also wants to continue building the wall, of course. It's been kind of a very big campaign strategy for him is to talk about building the wall. It's already in progress. It was in progress in the Obama era as well. But he wants to continue building that. Any questions on that? Very opposite policies, either make it easier to immigrate or make it harder to immigrate. That's really
Man, this sucks because low-key, I kind of agree with both.
Right, and I'm saying there are definitely sides to each story. So immigration will take a little bit more digging in order for you to really understand where you lie, which is why we can have a whole conversation on immigration if you want.
And like me personally, I agree with you, Travis. There are sides on both that I kind of agree with.
Definitely.
I mean, I'm not against immigration, but when it comes to bad people, like criminals and shit, trying to get into my home, that's where I get irritated at. Like, I can understand if like a family, I don't know if that makes sense, because like I don't want a murderer.
So you would probably advocate
there's a lot more criminals that were born in the U.S. than criminals that were not.
You're right. You're right. I know that.
But I think it's also okay to be on the side of advocating for more vetting of immigrants coming in. I think that's okay.
Totally.
I mean, I don't have a problem with them getting in, but like, I really would like to know who you are. I want to know if you got, you know, I want to know who you came from. I want to know what you've done your whole life. I want to know everything if you want to get into my home.
Yep. So you would be an advocate for higher or for increased vetting of immigrants. Yep. And that's okay.
Perfect.
But I'm also with building the wall, you know, like if you don't want to go my route, then you're not going to get in.
It's fair. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of sides to this story with immigration. Very brief on foreign policy. Biden believes in international cooperation, which means cooperating with other countries, creating allies with other countries, basically, and saying, you know, we need to advocate for other people that aren't in the U.S. because the U.S. is very privileged. Let's advocate for other countries. And also, let's fight against authoritarianism or basically tyrannies like North Korea. We have a dictator there. So he's saying, let's fight against rising dictatorships, rising authoritarianism, and basically work together with other countries to fight against that. Trump's policy is America first. So we need to not necessarily, he says, let's not focus on global affairs so much. Let's focus on ourselves first before we focus on other countries and helping them. Let's help ourselves before we help other people. So pretty black and white there on their differences.
I agree with Trump's America first thing.
Cool.
To be honest.
Yep. Again, this is very simplified. If you want to learn more about it, you can definitely dig into it. We can have a whole other thing about that because it's definitely more than a one sentence description, right?
I mean, if you look back in history, all you notice is that when we don't focus much on ourselves. We focus on going into over to other places and either taking stuff or making alliances. Right. We don't really focus on our, I don't know if that makes sense, our home. Yeah.
No, it definitely makes sense. It just depends on where your priorities are, right? If your priority is America first, awesome. Then you would agree with Trump. If you care more about helping the other countries and making sure we're making alliances with the other countries, then you'll agree more with Biden. I think there's merit to both. It just kind of depends on where you lie. So that's what's hard, is that there's merit to all this, right? It just depends on where you're at. I think that right and wrong answers are very muddy when it comes to politics.
Yeah, I don't know. Confusing.
And then very quickly, the last 2 points. We talked about Roe v. Wade, which is the court case many years ago that helped the government basically legalize abortions. And so this is a very controversial topic and I know it, but Biden is saying, let's solidify Roe v. Wade. Let's make sure that we don't ever lose Roe v. Wade, and let's make sure we restore federal funding to Planned Parenthood and make access to abortions not necessarily easier, but people need safe access to abortions, is what he's saying. Although his voting history would say otherwise, that he necessarily doesn't really believe in that, and he does believe in restricting access to abortions. But now he's saying in his campaign, he's saying let's give access to safe abortions. And
it's really about allowing the woman to make the choice.
Yeah, and it's women's rights. Women's rights is definitely a part of that, and making sure that a woman has a choice in that, and making it so that she has access to it if she needs it.
Rather than some old white male government politician making the choice for her.
Who would never be pregnant and doesn't have any idea about that. Yeah.
So you guys probably know where I stand on that
one. Trump's plan is to, and he's I guess kind of already started this, but he wants to limit access to abortion. His goal is to basically completely overturn Roe v. Wade, which means eliminate that court case that legalized abortions, and he wants to really limit access to it, limit all funding to Planned Parenthood, make it so that it's not an option, basically is his goal. Which isn't the case. You still have access to abortions right now, but his goal is to overturn that. So yeah, very black and white. One agrees with it, one does not. And that really comes down to personal preference. It's a very controversial subject, and I know it. Lastly, With LGBTQ rights, Biden is working to protect LGBTQ people from discrimination, and he wants to reverse the transgender military ban that Trump has put into place. So we know where Trump stands on that. He has already implemented a ban for transgender people to serve in the military. So if you are transgender, you are not allowed to serve in the military. He has already implemented that ban. And Biden wants to overturn that and make sure that LGBTQ people are protected and have the same rights.
They're just gonna get killed if they go to the military. People in the military think horribly of them. I bet you almost all of them. It is not all different yet. They need to. If you want to protect them, then don't let them go into the military.
And that may have been right. If you wanted to do further research, you might find that was Trump's, intention was to protect them. So there's a lot more to it than just. I know that these are really simplified statements, but I'm just trying to give facts without as much opinion in them as possible so that we can really just look at the facts. So there's very differing opinions. That was the last thing that I had here. You can see that they're basically black and white opposites on almost every policy. So that could make it easier, or that could make it a lot harder to decide who to vote for you, depending on, there is merit to both sides for a lot of these things, and I definitely know that. So this might take a little more research for you guys to dig into some of the more important things to you to see where Biden and Trump fall. But really, this is the kind of main things that a lot of people talk about, some of the kind of hot button topics and where they stand on each. I will post this. There are some problems here that we've kind of already talked about. We have a Senate that is led almost exclusively by Republicans, and we have a House of Representatives that is led by the Democrats. And so they have really different opinions. And so when they try to vote on things, they don't vote and they clash. And so not a lot gets passed not a lot of bills get passed because Senate doesn't agree with what the House wants and the House doesn't agree with what the Senate wants. And they both have to decide and vote on the same thing in order for things to pass, right? So when people don't agree, nothing gets passed. That's definitely been an issue in every presidency. That's an issue, and it's hard for things to get done because nobody agrees on anything. So do some research on your own if you guys are undecided on who you're going to vote for. But the moral of the story is vote. If you care about any of these issues, vote. Get your voice heard. Okay?
And so I think Lily did a really good job of being as unbiased as he could. Some of this stuff, it's really difficult. And I think we're both, be honest, Lily and I, that we definitely stand on one of these sides. And it's okay to stand on the other side, absolutely. Mm-hmm. What's important is that we're able to communicate, why we're on one side or the other and respect the other person's decision.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, you guys know it. We've talked about it. You know that I voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary. RIP that he didn't make it to this stage.
He's not dead.
No, I know. He's not in the close though. I mean, he's not in the election anymore. It makes me sad, but I mean, I guess Biden and him are working together on some things, but I'll believe when I see it.
Yep.
So I have issues with both of these people. Don't get me wrong. I have issues with both of them. But we've definitely talked about which side Alex and I sit on mostly. But that's up to you guys to make that decision.
I really want to emphasize it's okay to be on the other side. You don't have to agree with us. Absolutely. We tried to be as unbiased as possible, but sometimes it's difficult, we will admit. But I think the information Lily provided is very unbiased, and it
thank you for
outlines a lot of kind of what we're facing and kind of the complications
I tried very hard
with trying to understand this stuff. Because it is hard. Even for Lily and I, we both have multiple degrees, and it's difficult for us to keep up with it. So we understand how hard it can be for you guys as well. So we tried to come up with something that is simple. And so I think it's great that she's going to post it. It can be used as a resource in the future once voting season comes even closer.
Totally. That's the goal. That was so much information. Do you guys have questions? Do you feel like your brain is fried?
Comments? Yeah, I didn't know which side you guys were on. You guys said that I didn't hear.
Oh, I just thought that you guys knew based on everything we've talked about in the past. But I definitely fall to the blue side. I fall to the Democrat side on almost everything. That's just, it's the way that we were raised, has something to do with it, the way that our parents think. has a lot to do with where you fall, and then how you
And
personally
kind of like
feel
our,
about every individual issue is going to help
Are you
you
voting for
determine where
Joe?
you fall.
what was that, Allie?
So would you vote for Joe?
I will be voting for Joe Biden in the election.
I will as well.
Tell you that. But that we all have very different opinions. We all have different life experiences that are going to determine how we feel about all these different issues we talked about.
I
You know,
forgot
you
that
agree
Joe.
with Biden on one thing and you agree with Trump on the other. It just kind of depends on where most of your priorities lie, right? So, okay, you maybe agree with Trump on some things, but in general, you agree with Biden on most stuff. Okay, that's good.
I think it's important to try to understand all of their policies, but I also, how do I say this? And so, like, Lily might disagree with this statement, but I think it's also okay to be a one policy voter. Like, if there's one issue that you are very passionate about and you vote for somebody based on their one stance, I understand that.
I don't disagree.
So there's a lot of people where their one main issue is the Roe versus Wade stuff. And, you know, I think that's okay. I would just encourage those individuals to try to understand the other policies as well and not just be blinded to all of those other policies. Because I know for myself, I'm voting for Biden. I'm not super happy about it. I was kind of telling Lily yesterday, I've pretty much become a one-issue voter for this election season. And my one issue is primarily environment
So
stuff. So, yeah, that's because
nothing's
Biden is
gonna
better
matter
on
if
the
we don't
environment.
live anymore.
That's why I'm voting on that side. That's the main reason. And I definitely agree with almost every other point more on Biden's side, but that is my primary issue, and that is the primary reason I will be voting for Biden.
Yep, there are definitely, I have higher priorities than others. Environment is at the very top, and education is right underneath that for me. So if he's going to put money into education in terms of whether it's paying for college or whether it's putting more money into the K through 12 system, I am here for it.
And then for both of us as well, I think Lily and I, we work in this field because it's also important for us to know that you guys are getting resources to help you guys be built up, to get you guys easier access to college and things like that.
And other social services
easier
like
access to housing and all that. Yep. So that's why we vote on that side as well.
Yeah. But it really depends on where you lie. And I won't judge you, regardless of who you vote for. It's not what it's about. So it's just, you guys have to make that decision for yourself and really try hard not to let other people influence you. I don't agree with my parents on everything, and we've had conversations about it, and I've made my own opinion about a lot of stuff after some of the life experiences I've had in college and all that. And so it's okay to not agree with people. Do your own thing. You know, make those decisions based on your own feelings.
Yep, and really just start to try to develop your own personal philosophy in all this. And as you develop that, then you're going to develop, you're going to develop stances, and you kind of know where you're going to fall in terms of one way or the other. And there's other parties as well, and maybe you align more with those other parties. And that's fine as well.
We didn't even talk about that. It's a whole nother thing.
I know.
It's because they'll never win an election because
I know, which is the sad part. But
one of these people will win the election if they don't die first, and I say that because they're both very old. But it's probably okay.
Yeah. Okay. This went pretty long.
It did.